So, as a lot of you know, I recently joined the Labour Party, and I've seen a lot of comments, some wishing me luck, some saying, good luck, but, I just left for X reason, or, I won't be back until X. And I think I want to address a lot of those comments at a later date, but part of the reason why I think that it is more than ever important that you join the Labour Party or even consider rejoining even after you maybe been so disappointed is that if you are not in the fight, if you are not pushing for change, you won't get it. It's just as simple as that. And I was so delighted because on my first day, you now get a digital form of membership where you can log into like your own portal, and you can see what other local Labour organisations are doing and what they're putting forward as proposals for policy and such like that. And I was so happy because I can't remember which local Labour organisation did it, but they put forward a motion that Labour should be pushing for proportional representation. And I was so happy because, as I'm going to reiterate, I think this is one of the things we have to get through. There is a lot of political apathy in this country. And the problem is, if you don't fight, you don't get change. It's as simple as that. And trust me, I was someone who started off as quite a big fan of Starmer. However, I've really cooled on him. And like I say, even though I am now a member of the Labour Party, I'm not going to stop jumping on him, because I think criticism is always well deserved. Just as, I was a fan of Corbyn, not originally, I didn't start off as a fan of him, but I still had huge criticisms of him. He could be a good public speaker, but there were times where he just, like a steam locomotive, he just seemed to run out of steam. And second of all, he just wasn't a good leader. I still think he was a good policy advocate, but as a leader, not so much. But that's beside that, because today we're going to talk about Keir Starmer, because I am worried that Labour will drop the ball. I really am worried. But there's a time before, up to the next general election, and we can start to talk about that and make changes to that before the ball gets dropped. So, as always, please do remember to hit that like and share button. And also down below, there's a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And thank you to all those people that do support me that way. So, on with today's story. So, this comes from The Guardian, and the title is, "On tax and as on so much else, Keir Starmer's team is fighting yesterday's battles." Next week, our Conservative government is set to ask profitable companies to contribute more tax. It will do so in the face of fierce Labour opposition, by opposing an increase in corporation tax, the lowest of the major G7 economies, and a windfall tax on companies that have profited from the crisis. Labour has placed it firmly in to the right of Rishi Sunak. It is on a collision course too with public opinion. 67% back a rise in corporation tax and support an unsurprisingly even more decisive among Labour voters. It is strikingly to the right of Joe Biden's administration. Even with plans to raise corporation tax to 28%, even business leaders themselves are largely relaxed about the corporation tax rise, according to the Financial Times. Labour's opposition to the tax rise is yet another illustration of an increasingly obvious truth. The party's leadership lacks a political soul and is devoid of any meaningful cohesive vision for the country that it seeks to lead, which is again something I am heavily criticising of Labour of. They have no vision. They have no policies to talk about. And the leaked Labour report said it best. No one knows what Labour stands for. And it is Keir Starmer's job to know, to say what Labour stands for. Under Corbyn, you could say exactly what the party stood for through its policies that he advocated for. But Not so under Starmer. So Keir Starmer's allies make the case that their defence of corporate Britain is simply Keynesian. Taxes should not rise in a recession, and that his promise during his leadership campaign to increase taxes on big businesses and the affluent do remain intact. This argument is weak as it is disingenuous. The shadow Foreign Secretary Lisa Nadler suggested that paying an increased corporation tax could mean businesses going under, apparently unaware that it is only levied on profits and therefore struggling businesses are exempt. Indeed, the evidence is that raising corporation tax should lead to a more balanced and sustainable recovery, while stopping inequality from escalating. Labour isn't even making a persuasive case for the future tax rises once the economy is on its feet. But this isn't about economics, it's about politics. Starmer's aides are making clear to increasingly exasperated shadow ministers that this is about changing Labour's reputation as a party of tax risers. The problem is that strategy is failing, even on its own terms. Labour is stuck in 2015, and while the public have moved on, as shadow ministers point out, the public expects tax to rise to help stimulate the UK's post-pandemic recovery. So the opposition needs to be clear about who will be asked to contribute more and by how much. Even before the pandemic, public attitudes on taxation and spending had dramatically shifted. Back in 2009, just 30% believed the deficit reduction should come through higher taxes. That is now 47%. The Tories have picked up on the public mood, so why hasn't Labour? Starmer's team believe the party must be cleansed of its false reputation for overspending in the run-up to the 2008 crash. But last year, only a quarter of people blamed the Labour Party for causing austerity. Public opinion has shifted dramatically, in part because of Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party was prepared to make coherent arguments against austerity and in favour of fairer taxation and spending on public services. It even widened the Overton window, that is, the realm of political possibility. Starmer's team now seems determined to slam it shut. This lack of political ambition speaks to a wider problem in the leadership team. Starmer's head of policy, Claire Ainsley, is widely blamed for blocking attempts to oppose Tory policies and strategy. This is largely due to the disproportionate attention given to the views of voters who defected to the Conservatives in 2019, as revealed in focus groups conducted by the party. A near cliche view in focus groups is an aversion to playing politics. It's likely that the Tories heard the same thing during the 2008 financial crash, but they nevertheless persevered and pushed a narrative of Labour overspending. Rather than simply repeating what the focus groups told them, they made the political weather, and Labour has failed to communicate the government's disastrous handling of the pandemic and consequently allowed it to get away with it. The political direction is coming from the focus groups because Starmer's team lacks political vision to actually guide them. They desperately want to win power, but they don't know why. Last week, Starmer delivered a speech about inequality with laudable lines, not least arguing with closing the gap to income and wealth was inextricably tied to prosperity for all. But the signature policy floated, the British Recovery Bond, failed on 2 counts. It was technical rather than totemic, failing to tell a story of what Starmer's Britain could look like, and it fell short of helping those who needed support most, favouring the middle-class savers rather than those struggling with lost income and debt. Even in the late 90s, New Labour offered a modest but important reforms like the minimum wage, a windfall tax on privatised utilities, and devolution and gay rights, which the Tories all opposed. Boris Johnson's Conservatives will happily appropriate any mild tinkering proposed by Labour. But without actual progressive policies, is it impossible for Labour to offer a distinct political prospectus? The most comprehensive study of the 2019 election calamity concluded Labour must not abandon its economic radicalism, but it is being completely ignored. A savvy leadership team would debate what progressive and popular policies could be salvaged from the Corbyn era. If Starmer's predecessor was seen as a legitimate leader, Then there would be an attempt to learn from the 2017 election about why Labour lost, but also why it attracted its biggest voter surge since 1945 and its highest vote share since 2001. At the time, even Corbyn's most bitter opponents among the Parliamentary Labour Party agreed the policies had played a key role. But it had been decided that period must be expunged from Labour history. This isn't even the 1990s, an era of growth driven by unsustainable financial bubble. The way that, quote, when the third way politics dominated on both sides of the Atlantic. In today's crisis-stricken era, centre-left governments from Spain to the US have gained power by striking some form of accommodation with the left. This is not a lesson Starmer's team seems to be interested in. At the time when existing inequalities have been revealed and the country faces long-term scarring from the impact of the pandemic, there is a common consensus that far-reaching change is needed. Instead, the Labour leadership seeks power without vision. That is, to be fair, an interesting political experiment, but it is one unlikely to end well, and it is not too late to change course. And I completely agree with that statement. That is why partly I've joined, because I want to help change that course. And the thing is, like anything in this is battles that you have to fight. And sometimes, admittedly, you are not going to win the battles. But as I said, we are all about hope on this channel. And sometimes, if you lose a battle, you don't truly lose it if you can learn from the mistakes and learn not to repeat those mistakes, or to even make changes to the way you fight the battles, and especially the future battles to come. So, as always, thank you, and please do remember to hit that like and share button on your way out. And of course, down below there was a link to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link. And thank you very much to all those people who do support me that way. And as always, we'll see you all next time.